Hello, my sweet friends. I hope you are all doing well. Welcome to day 7 of our 13 Days of Halloween series. If you're just joining in, you can find links for the first 6 days at the top of the description, and make sure you stay tuned throughout the video for the question of the day. Today, we're going to create a flip folio with that awesome card and envelope set I picked up from the Dollar General. We have used these in the past, but unlike in previous projects, we're going to leave the envelopes in the original size and then use those cards to create the hinges between the pages. So if that sounds good to you, then stick around and we'll make it together. I'm working with this Park Lane Crypts and Cobwebs 6x8 paper pad today. I did pick this up from Joann's and I shared it in my haul. I'll say that I have some thoughts on this paper pad, and my first impression was that I really liked the quality of the paper, and the print is very nice and crisp and clear, and so I initially thought that this was a really great paper pad. Upon using it, I have discovered that rather than having the pages tear away from the top, it has a perforated edge. And so it did not affect my project, but I believe that it would not be a true 8-inch high paper if you had to cut below that perforated line. So it may affect your project. And so I just thought I would share that little detail, because now I'm wondering if this is as good as my first impression. But I just wanted to share that with you in case you wanted to know that. I've also got my card set. Remember, we get these from the Dollar General. It's an A7 size card with 6 included, and they have matching envelopes. Obviously, I'm just filling my little bag here with offcuts for my project, but they do have black. That's what we're using today. They had white and I think cream as well. So you can pick the set that best matches your project. We're going to start our cover with this piece of black cardstock. It's cut to be 7 1/4 by 11 1/2. My first score line, it comes in at 5 1/4, and I'm leaving the second score line until I adhere the back portion of this book so that I can get that score exactly where I want it. I'm also going to create thicker cover pages by wrapping both of these sides with an additional layer of cardstock. So I have these cut to be 7 1/4 by 10 1/2 and scored at 5 1/4. Obviously, you want to add 2 glues to make this very secure. And I do find it is much easier to tear the tape from one side and then position that and pull the tape after you have it adhered to your book. Just going to lay that in alongside the score line, making sure to keep it nice and straight and even as I go along. Now I'll pull the tape from this side as well, and then repeat that process of adding the additional glue, folding that over and pressing that into place. Not only are we improving the sturdiness of it, but we're also going to get that nice finish edge along that side. So I'll repeat that process for this side as well. Okay, so here is my cover all ready. We can begin to work with those cards and envelopes. So my first step is going to be joining 3 of the cards together, and we'll have 3 for either side. This is going to create the hinge for those pages to be connected. And so I'm just going to take my double-sided tape here and bring these together at the corner and along the side and the bottom. I'll do the same for this one as well. Also taken the envelopes and just folded the flap into the envelope so that I can have those cards slide into here, and then we'll adhere them for the pages for the folio. So what I want to do is have an adhesive strip here and then work that card into the envelope, push it in as far as it will go. Now, remember that we had our tape in there. I'm just going to pull that envelope up a little bit so I can work my craft knife down in between those layers. And then pull the backing off of that tape and just secure that. So that is going to give us our nice finished edges all the way around. And then I'll repeat that process by adding my tape here and then putting the envelope on and pulling the backing from the tape. So I've got all of my cards and envelopes brought together. I want to include one more detail for this side, for this section, and that is going to be add an additional layer here to create a flip page from this one. And I want to be aware of where these cards are opening. And so I want the book to open toward this way. And this piece is 7 1/4 high by 10 1/2 wide. It's scored at 5 1/4. I'm going to fold that card into there. Then pull the remaining tape from this side. This is just going to sandwich that last remaining card in between these layers. Now I'm going to bring this to the cover and join them together. I'm using that 2 glue combo again. I think it will be easier to fold on my score line and bring these two together so that I've got it positioned exactly where I want. And then press that into place. So I have prepared the section that will go on this side as well. Just bringing my edges together. Then I'll come in and add that second score line so that I know it's right on the edge exactly where I want it. So now we have our folio all ready to cover with our pattern paper. So my spine lines up to be 1 inch wide by 7 1/4 inches high, and I've cut some of the pattern paper to cover that. It is going to be 7 1/8 by 7/8. For the inside, I'm just going to lay that on here and then work that right up the middle. For the outside, I'm just going to go ahead and add a layer of our Tombow to our glue, and so that way it will be extra secure. This is much easier to do now than when you have all the dimensional bits added. Okay, so we've got our spine covered. We can work in our pattern paper. So these 2 pages show together. I'm treating them as a 2-page spread. I've got my pattern paper here cut to be 7 1/8 by 5 1/8, and that will be the same measurement for all of these pages as we're working throughout. I also wanted to incorporate a couple of little pockets for items that you want to include but you don't want to adhere to the book. So I've cut an additional piece of that pattern paper to be 5 1/8 by 5 1/8, and then I cut it on my guillotine cutter corner to corner so that I know that I could pull those apart and then they would be the opposite corner. This really only works with a non-directional paper where you have to cut additional squares, but this worked out well for me. This worked out well for that polka dot. So I'm going to add a little bit of my Tombow, being very careful not to splooge it over too far. I don't want it coming out from the edge. And then I can just lay that right into the corner and utilize the cardstock border that we already have. want to just press that into place while the glue sets up, but I can continue to work along here. I got my little die cut doily here. This is a Recollections doily. It is 3.5 inches wide, so that fits perfectly on the side of the angle here so that I don't accidentally seal up my pocket. And the collection had a cut apart sheet. The images are a little bit smaller than you would get for a 12 by 12 cut apart sheet in. So these are actually also going to work well here in the corner. I cut them out and then I added a layer of black cardstock just so it would look consistent with the borders that I have already on these pages. So I'll repeat that process to adhere this pocket as well. Now we have our first 2-page layout done. So I'm just going to continue using those pages that coordinate for all of the 2-page spreads here so that I get a consistent look. This is also going to cover where the envelope shape came down below the edge. As I was cutting the paper for all these pages, I realized that I was winding up with offcuts that would be exactly the perfect height for using as a layering detail. So I just kept them all while I was working along, and then I mix and match them so that I could change the tone or the scale of the pattern. So now I'm going to get a really nice border out of these what would be offcut pieces. Just brings in a little bit of extra detail. I have one more detail planned for those offcuts, and I'll show you those when we get all these pages covered. But I'm just going to go ahead and repeat that same process with the same measurements, and then I'll give you a little Halloween music to listen to and meet you back here when I'm all set. I'm going to cover the back with this gorgeous plaid. This was part of one of the foiled sheets, and so I feel like I just want to add a little bit of extra adhesive to make sure that this is well and truly stuck down. I know part of one of the things I loved about this paper pad was that it had foiling, and so it does seem a little silly to cover it or adhere it down to a base, but I had to get that plaid in, so I had to sacrifice the foiling, and that is okay. So I'm just going to add that. This is going to match the spine pattern that we've already added. And then I also already added this piece of bold check ribbon trim. I just pulled off the amount I wanted for a generously sized bow. And then I tacked that down temporarily with some double-sided tape. I'm gonna pick that same plaid for the front cover. And I did decide to add some of those offcuts to the bottom, just for a layering pattern, and that would be optional for you if you wanted to add that. So here's my focal image. Now remember that I've got a 6x8 paper pad, and so that cut apart sheet was having the images pretty small, and I didn't find one that I wanted for the cover. So I just took one of the patterns in the paper pad and cut it down to fit in this border, and so it would have extended past all the way across the 6 inches, but I wanted to cut that down and have that as an accent on the bottom. And so I did pop that up on a spacer and add it here. Got a fairly large flower arrangement since we don't have a doily on the front of this folio, and so I have just created that with some handmade flowers, one of the flowers from the Dollar Tree package, some netting, loopy twine bows, die cut foliage, glitter stars, and then more of that beautiful bold check ribbon. Before I add that though, I want to incorporate this large owl charm, and so for me it makes sense to put this where it will just be seen on the side of the pattern. And I'll just hide that cut string underneath my flower arrangement. I mentioned earlier that that cut apart sheet had fairly small images, and then I also had quite a few of the offcuts, and so I was just taking the wider strips of them and I brought them together by clipping them and then adding that detail to the ends just by folding it in half and clipping through. And then I picked one of those image cut aparts and used my tiny attacher to adhere these all together. So this is kind of an embellishment bundle. Now I didn't want to adhere them right down to the book before considering the finishing details that I would add. So I'll leave this set here, and then I would consider putting this here or maybe over here, depending on where the pictures and the details that you want to add. So I just added adhesive to these, and then they can be included as a finishing detail when your pictures are added. So I wound up with 4 just by cutting the remaining images from that cut apart and then pairing it with the offcuts that I cut that dovetail detail to. So that is 4 embellishment clusters that can be incorporated, and I'll just add this to the book and keep these together. It's tying a sweet little bow here. So we've got one final detail, of course, and that is going to be our sequins. I pulled down a couple of different options just because I wasn't sure exactly how this was going to come together on the front with all the layering. And so I picked ones that I thought would coordinate. This black, I believe, is just going to be too much contrast and look too busy. So, and I also considered this orange one, but I didn't really have any orange flowers or trim added, so I might discard that choice as well. So now I'm left with a gray and this sort of off-white. I think I'm going to pick that one because the little details here are so small and I don't want it to look too busy. So I think while I pick these out, it is time for the question of the day. Would you rather stay home and hand out candy, or trick or treat and get candy? Now, obviously, that is a hypothetical question because we are all adults now, but that's just a for funsies question. And so I'm going to pick going to hand out candy. We live in the country, and all the 20 years we've been here, we've never had a trick or treater. And so I just think that would be a really fun experience. They have some campgrounds here where they have a Halloween event, and so people will decorate their site, and then the little kiddos can come around and trick or treat, and they have some other kind of fun activities. So I asked the tech hubby to see. Usually those book up pretty quickly because obviously it's kind of a major fun thing to do for the campground, but maybe they have a cancellation and we can get in there and do that. So I'm hoping that we'll get to do that this year. So you can let me know down in the comments what is your pick. And that is all for our folio today for day 7. Make sure you plan to join us for day 8. If you enjoyed this tutorial, let me know in the comments and give me a big thumbs up for this video. As always, I have links in the description so you can find the products I mentioned as well as our socials. And if you're not already, I would love for you to subscribe and join my crafty little family. As always, I'm wishing you a happy and productive day, and I thank you so much for watching. Bye!